Thanks for joining us. Let's go to the next slide, Allison.
No?
Mine moved. Did yours?
Yeah. Oh, I'm
Okay.
Laurie, we good?
It says teacher shortages in the U.S.
No.
You went one too many.
No, that's what I have right there.
The people don't know their power.
Yeah, we saw it just a minute ago. It was the Kit cartoon. You just advanced to Allison instead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I guess I'm not seeing what you're advancing to.
You're not.
I'll have to advance myself. Anyway, so the people don't know their power. This is their true power. This is where we wanted to start, because what this webinar really is intended to do is to further empower you. I think that this is a great sort of depiction of the way our country is really organized. We saw in the last election the power of voting and what happens when people don't vote. And I think now certainly is a great opportunity to reinvigorate ourselves and to really claim our power. And Allison, I think, maybe you could talk for a minute about what that means in terms of being a State Teacher of the Year or a finalist.
Allison, you can unmute yourself. Got it? Okay.
I got it. Yes, as far as being a STOY is concerned, we are very, we're in a very good spot, but you have to have the finesse to work the position that you're in. You really have to feel confident, and that's what our webinar is about tonight. We're going to talk briefly about teacher attrition and what's going on nationally as well as just in Utah, but that's not our actual topic. The deep topic here tonight is actually, how do we as STOYs prepare ourselves to be a part of the conversation? How do we use that position that we have of true teacher leadership in order to push policy, or at least to really get messages out to those who don't understand what education is really like? We have to build those relationships. So that's what we hope you walk away with tonight, are some ideas that will help you feel more confident when you're talking to policymakers.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. And again, we're just looking, we're using this as a window into strategy, really. So teacher shortage, my guess is that most of you have some sort of teacher shortage in your state. These are some statistics nationally. You see that we clearly 100,000 we could be 100,000 teachers short by 2018 if things aren't turned around. One of the things that is concerning too is that our pipeline is not looking good. The enrollment in teacher prep programs is way down. Teacher salaries, we know, is part of the challenge why people don't go into teaching. In some states, that's particularly critical. And this shortage does not affect all students in all schools equally. Clearly, the highest need schools are bearing the brunt of this, as are the 3 areas of special education, STEM, and English learners. So nationally, this is a challenging picture that's with us. Let's go to the next one. So retention and reasons for leaving. Many of you are deeply and personally aware of this. Turnover annually is 8%, and it again is not equally distributed. The schools with the greatest need tend to get hit the hardest. About half of our teachers are leaving in the first 5 years. Many reasons for that. Compensation is certainly one. The one I hear the most often is lack of leadership in the school, lack of administrative support, or not the right kind of support. Not enough time to do what you as professionals know you need to do. Collaboration, joint planning, etc. Something this organization's committed to is career continuums, advancement options all the way up to teacher leadership. So I'm sure you could add to that list, but this is the national picture of what is challenging in this area. So let's move on to Utah.
You bet. Utah is geographically a really large state. It's one of the bigger states, and because of that, that gives us unique needs. You can see some of the data here, and I won't read all of it to you, but it lets you know that we have similar challenges, especially with keeping and finding teachers with the sciences, and that we're not keeping up with the needs we have in our schools, both because we have rising enrollments that we're not keeping up with, but also because we're not keeping millennials. We cannot keep up with the retirement rate, and also with the losses we get in the first 5 years, which is really frustrating. Another thing that you may not know about Utah that makes it a little unique, especially when compared with smaller states on the East Coast, is that because we are geographically so large, in the center of Utah, we have some very rural areas, and they really struggle to keep and to really attract teachers to come in to the point where we came up with new licensing this year. And when I say we, I mean our state board. That is a very simple license process that allows anyone who has a bachelor's degree and can pass a content exam and pass a background check to get a level 1 license. And that was done primarily for our rural districts, although I think almost every district will use it. So you can see more data here. These are our retention numbers. I think they're fairly similar to those in the country. And there was actually a story that just came out today on KSL.com, which is a local news authority in Utah, and it was really driving home that those that have a bachelor's degree that are teaching in Utah are getting paid far less than other professions that also require a bachelor's degree. So it's getting some attention right before our legislative session, which is a good thing. We'll see what happens. We do traditionally have the largest classrooms or the largest class size in the nation. We vacillate back and forth for that award with Idaho, but we do have really the largest student to teacher ratio. That's another thing that's another reason we lose teachers. It is a hard job, and because we don't have a very consistent statewide mentoring program, we're losing those people that come right in those first couple of years. We cannot keep them. So you can see that in Utah, we have a lot to talk about. We have a lot that we're passionate about. We have conversations we want to have with policymakers, and that's what we're here tonight for, is we want to talk about how do you have those conversations, even in a state like Utah, where it is so obvious what our needs are. How do you have those conversations and really make relationships so that these people who do have control and do have the ability to make informed decisions, so that they trust you and they come to you for more information? That's what we're looking at tonight.
Okay, should we go on to the next slide?
Yes.
This is meant to provide a little humor. I don't know if we have any physics teachers on with us, but maybe in the not too distant future, this will be one solution to the shortage. We shall see.
We just did a license for that this year.
Okay.
Reading them all the time.
So now we're going to transition. If we go to the next slide where we have question 1. Now we're transitioning into our, so how do we do this part? What's our strategy? So here we are in Utah or Missouri or Oklahoma or wherever you happen to be, and you are aware of a very significant problem that you would like to address with your policymakers. And so what do you do? What do you do first? And we're going to go through a series of questions to address, and we're going to have some brainstorming on these questions. And what we're going to ask you to do is to pull up your chat box and take a few minutes and think about this first question. How do you decide who to meet with and when to meet? So let's just take a few minutes, have in your mind whatever your topic is, if it's teacher shortages or pay cuts or pension or tenure issues, teacher evaluation, whatever it might be. And there you are, and you're ready for action. And how do you decide who to meet with and when?
So Jane, are you asking us to put some answers in the chat box, just sort of do a
Please.
little brainstorm?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody
Yes.
can do that? Okay.
I'm glad to see Heather's pointing out that she's got a real need for this right now as a Teacher Champion Fellow. That's excellent, Heather. Thanks for sharing that. So let's make sure we get in there. How do you decide who you're going to talk to? For example, last summer when they were changing the licensing, I didn't go to any legislators. I went to the state board because they were the group that was working on licensing. There's one example. So what are you thinking? Let's get some chats up here.
And by when, we mean, you know, do you try to meet when the legislature's in session? Do you try to meet when they're not in session? Do you try to meet before a board meeting, after board meeting, that sort of thing?
Good. We've got local. I see a lot of you are looking at local, and you definitely have power with your local policymakers, especially if they're in your area, that, you know, if you're someone that could vote for them. Excellent. Heather, can you describe if you've done that before to bring your legislator to school?
What a great idea.
That's hard to get them in, I tell you what.
Can you hear me talking?
Yes.
Okay. We actually have done it a couple times. I had a senator just in, I had a rep in, I had the lieutenant governor in, and there I pretty much just sent an email out. I was at the Achieves convening in New York, actually, because I'm a lead fellow for America Achieves also. And I just sort of threw an email out and thinking that nobody would respond, like he wouldn't respond, and I got a response and they just said, hey, I'll come in on October 24th. So there is a definite agenda. I can share a link that I use like each time they come in. And I also just wanted to comment that the lieutenant governor in Michigan has a connection with me because I'm a special ed teacher. So, and he has a daughter on the autism spectrum. So I think trying to find connections possibly can be helpful also.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. That's perfect. Thank you for sharing that. You never know. And you'll always get turned down if you don't send the email. So that is an excellent suggestion.
I think, too, your point about the lieutenant governor's child having being on the autism spectrum, sometimes people are hesitant to meet with people who they believe are, say, perhaps very conservative and all they want to do is cut the budget or something like that. But, you know, these personal connections can really jump the fence on some of those positions. So it's really important to not let that be a barrier. So
true. All right, I'm going to slide this forward, if you don't mind, and we're going to just kind of look at some suggestions we have for you, some considerations. You really want to look at, as you can see, you know, choosing a person who actually has authority over the issue that you have a question about. We just dipped our toe into starting a relationship, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But once you really have a question, you want to make sure, am I connecting with the right person? And again, that second bullet point there, it depends on what you what route you're going to take. What's the process? And at what time of year is it? For example, it's almost too late right now for the legislative session to get somebody to write a bill. It almost has to be done a good 6 months before. So you want to make sure that you're really getting to where you need to be. If it's something about legislation that's in place, then certainly you want to jump on it. And then, and that would be timing right down there. But then there are also activities. My greatest suggestion for you here is to find out in your area, where can you find out what activities are going on? And honestly, every single legislator sends out an email. They love to do that. So you can get on their list, get them to send you information.
Another great resource is the various websites. You can find out, when hearings might be going on. You can see lists of previous hearings on topics. I know at the federal level, I would imagine at the state level too, they record these hearings, and it's quite an education to listen to some of those, and you can watch the members of the committee ask questions, see what kinds of questions they ask, get a sense for their perspective.
Yes. Yeah. Our state board has theirs online, and so I can listen to anytime I want to. I just link in and I listen to them live. The video.
Yeah, you learn a lot, don't you?
Yes. Oh, yes. You can find some great talking points just listening, and they're very impressed when they hear you, relating to something that happened a couple of months ago, and they're oh, you listened. Okay, great. So.
One thing that a lot of people ask me, I work a lot with special ed also, and IDEA, as you know, is the major federal law. A lot of people say, I've got this proposal that we need to change IDEA. And, in terms of timing, nobody's talking about reauthorizing IDEA at the federal level. The talk is about the Higher Education Act next. So, to have a sense of what's on the agenda, what's coming, and not that you change your issue, but you may redirect it to a different body or a different kind of activity.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to the next question here. Question 2. Jane, you want to take that?
Sure. What do you need to know about the policy makers you're meeting with? So you've decided, say, to go meet with the chair of a committee because that's a committee that has jurisdiction over your issue. What do you need to know about this person? Take a few minutes in the chat room and see what comes up for you. What kind of homework do you want to do before you get in there?
Oh, there's definitely, there are a few questions about legislative aids, whether or not that would be worth your time, and I would absolutely say yes. In fact, if you can make a good connection with anyone in that office, that will help you so much to get that conversation later. Oh, wow. I use the 2 local universities by me, because I know where they all went to school, and that's how I get my conversation going, is where the aide went to college.
That's really smart. That's generally public information too. I used to work in the Senate myself, and so I bring that perspective to it in terms of meeting with staff. But, sometimes, frankly, you're better off with the staff, because the staff is likely to have more time for you. May be in a position to go into much more detail and to listen more deeply to you. And in many offices, staff have a tremendous amount of autonomy. So I would never feel slighted if you met with a staff person.
I'm noticing here a lot of you are talking about that you would definitely look at their voting record, and this is true. And some of you may think, how will I know that? Sometimes websites aren't as easy to search for information like that. One of the places I can go to in my state is my state association. They keep track of all of those voting records. And so as a member, it's easy for me to contact my state association and have them give me a list of the policymakers that support or are, against what I'm working on.
Another is to go to their websites, and they often will list their priorities up there. They'll list when their town hall meetings are going to be. You can go to a public event with an elected official and just listen and learn about their positions that way as well.
Definitely. I kind of goofed and gave you the screen, so I'll just go back to it. Here we go. So here are some considerations, definitely looking at their role, and political affiliation sometimes makes a difference. It definitely does.
I think also, if you're meeting with somebody who is in a leadership position in a party, like maybe the lead Republican in your legislature for, working to reelect other Republicans or something like that, that can be helpful to know because that person is likely to have a whole lot of clout with their peers.
Absolutely. The reelection thing, I tell you what, it's worth jumping on. Sometimes that's how you get them in your classroom because they would like that for their campaign. And you know what? Everybody scratches everyone else's back. There's no shame there.
They want your votes.
Absolutely.
I think, when somebody's up for re-election, it's like how you feel right before you're going to have your evaluation. I mean, the way, voters hire and fire people. So they're pretty hypersensitive to their constituents when they're up for re-election, especially if they're in a tight race. So it's a good thing to know.
Jane and Allie, Rich Anyabeni in his video said, really kind of get to know them, go to some of their things, and even donate to their campaigns sometimes. Doesn't have to be a large amount, but so that they see you as an ally and a supporter. What do you think about that? Well,
number one, you do that on your personal time and with your personal money, of course.
Right.
I'm sure I didn't have to say that.
No, but that's a good point.
It's very important, you certainly don't do that with any organizational funds or any, work thing. And it's just always important to remind ourselves of that. I think it's a great idea. I mean, a lot of times you by virtue of going to a fundraising event, hosting even some people a fundraising event, you definitely get a different level of attention from the person who's running. So that's really sort of a personal choice, and some people do it and do it very enthusiastically and very effectively. And there's no question but that people who are running for re-election pay attention to that.
Yeah, I agree. It's all, for me, it's about, do I really feel passionate about keeping this relationship with this person for future conversations? And if I do, you bet I'm there. And I will help campaign for that. I've been asked on a very local level with several people over the last couple of years since my year of recognition. And I'm happy to do that, knowing when I do know that person, that elected official really does support what we look for in education. I'm a little more guarded with those policymakers that don't, because I feel like I need to be true to education in my state. But I definitely keep the relationship going with the others, for sure. And we'll actually, we'll talk about that more when we talk about messaging in a minute here.
I think that last one about hot button issues you might want to avoid, that's important to know. If I'm going to meet with someone about, starting a teacher leadership certification, and I know that this person is a huge champion for vouchers and I don't support vouchers, that is just really important to think about. Like, what if the person you meet with says, what's your position on vouchers? Or, something along those lines. It's worth giving a little thought to. It doesn't mean you don't go to the meeting. And it's worth giving a little thought to how you might want to respond to something like that. If it's something you don't agree with, obviously you certainly don't want to bring it up. But that's, you know, that's important to know, how to manage issues that you might not agree on.
Definitely. All right, I'm going to switch to question 3. Here we go. What do you need to know about the policy problem and those who disagree with you? I think this is a big one, because if it's a big enough issue that you're going to step up and speak, there are 2 very passionate sides to it. That we know. So let's chat for a minute about what do you need to know about policy problems in general and about those that disagree with you, whether or not those people are the ones you're going to talk to. Definitely need to understand both sides. Excellent. Rebecca, could you expand on that? What kind of data are you talking about to back your position as far as voting or I mean, issues, or else educational data? Yeah, if you want to expand on that a little.
Data so that we can talk to the people and actually show to support our situation so that they can't, it's hard to disagree with data. So that if you have enough information to back your position, then that might get them thinking, say it's a teacher shortage, maybe they didn't know how bad the teacher shortage was within that area. So you need to show and give the numbers, because they always talk in numbers.
So true.
Very good.
So
Yeah,
true.
data can clarify the scope and the depth of something. You know, are you talking about just the scope and the depth? How big a problem is this? You know, and perhaps a timeline with a longevity. How long has this been a problem? What does the future look like for the problem? That kind of thing.
Laurie, I appreciate the comment about assuming their intentions are good. That's a very responsible and healthy attitude to walk in. I think we get really passionate about education in general because it's a human service. It's a social service of some kind for everyone's community. And we get frustrated easily. And we have to remember that everyone has good intentions for kids. And we're on the same team there. It's just that process of how we fund or how we organize our programs.
Even I learned when I was working at the department that even if the person you're meeting with has bad intentions, which is rare, or isn't very smart, going in there with that assumption about them will cripple your conversation.
Yes.
Right? So you have to say to yourself when you go in, even though I don't agree with this person, he's smart, he cares about education, he cares about kids. That's a place where I can even acknowledge we're on the same page, and maybe start with some places where we're together.
John, can you describe what you mean when you say purse strings can be long?
Yeah, what are their ties? We've got a lot going on with not just Chromebooks, but also Michelle Reed. We got, who are they connected to? What are their business connections? What kind of ties do they have? Not saying they're getting kickbacks or anything like that, but if they have a son working as a consultant in those are important things to know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And money is money.
Yeah.
It is. And it usually comes down to that in some form.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go to this next slide. These are some considerations we came up with, and you've touched on many of them. Jane, you want to take those?
Sure. I think this whole notion of the problem and the solution. I mean, at the core, the business of policy making is solving problems. And I think it's oftentimes easier for us to agree on the problem. Like, yes, we have shortages. It's kind of hard to dispute that. I mean, there certainly are some who challenge the data and read it differently, but for the most part, I think that's pretty solid agreement on that problem. Where people are really going to differ is the solutions.
Mhm.
And certainly you just went through that, Allison, in Utah. There are going to be some people who are going to say, well, the way to address this is to lower the standards because we need people in here right away. You might have a different position, which might be that when you lower the standards, it might be a short-term fix, but in the long term, it's going to make the problem worse because people aren't well prepared and they don't stay in the classroom as long. Maybe there's a middle ground. Maybe you have a short-term fix, but at the same time, you're building for a long-term solution. So I think in your mind, as you think about problems and solutions, that's a good way to approach. Often starting, what I'm here to talk about is this problem. Are you aware of it? How much do you know about it? Can I share some information with you? And here's a direction that I think would be really, really, really useful. Then you get to the second part where, and I have been in meetings where staff has asked this, okay, so what do the people who disagree with you think? Who are they and what's their opinion? It's a little bit, takes you back a little bit.
Sure.
But, it's important to at least have a sense of that because whoever you're meeting with is going to be hearing from the other side too. The minute you walk out the door, somebody else is going to walk in with a different idea for them. And it really is actually helpful if you can say, well, this is why I don't agree with them. This is why I think my solution will be more effective at solving the problem for these reasons. And that can be very powerful too.
I have to jump in on that. Last
Yeah.
summer when we were going through this new licensing, and I had 3 state board members call me, which I can explain later why they would call me. But one of them was very hard to work with. I had heard this. I had never spoken to her personally. And I have to tell you, I went in thinking I knew the other side. And yet, as I talked to her and she got really hot and upset, I kept saying, thank you so much for explaining that. I so appreciate that. I did just what I do with my students who push back. I was patient. I said, thank you a lot. Thank you for explaining that. I understand. And at one point she said to me, I like you, Allison. You're the first teacher that's not hung up on me about this issue. And I learned so much. I still didn't really agree with her, but I literally listened. And she did have some good points. And yes, the licensing went through. And yes, it's helping some rural districts. It's a mess for the rest of us, but it did solve a problem. So I learned a lot that day that I may have lost that issue, but I gained her trust for future issues because I was respectful to her and I tried to understand her position.
That's big. I think the strategy of listening is really powerful too, particularly if you feel like you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Just kind of back off and listen and ask questions. And everybody likes to be listened to. Everybody likes to answer questions, and it can go a long way.
Yes, Heather's got a great comment here. She's saying when they hear us complaining, they'll turn a deaf ear within the first few minutes. That is so true. We have to remember, as passionate as we are, we have to be adult and respectful, even to that point where we are addressing them as representative or senator or whatever it is their title is that they have earned.
Very good point.
Okay, let's go to 4 here. This is one of my favorites. What matters in messaging? Jane, you want to describe that question?
Well, yeah, so let's take the shortage for an example. Where are you going to start? What's your point? What is it you want to leave the person you meet with? Is it going to be a mountain of data? Is it going to be a story about a kid in your class? Is it going to be a personal experience you had? What are some of the ingredients? What are the what matters? What is going to make you heard?
Okay, go ahead and throw in some chats about what do you think matters in general when you're messaging, when you're sent, or with that message you're going to send. Excellent. We've got a lot. Thanks, Michael, making it about the students. It's so easy to use them for the emotional plea. They're so adorable. Keep it short. Excellent. Clear and succinct, and yet from the heart. So this is good. We're hearing, keep it on the kids and your heart, but also make it worth their time. They won't want to talk to you again if it's too long.
Good point.
Nice. Get across with a punch. Not a real one. And beautiful, beautiful point here. Be thinking it's that elevator pitch, it's that elevator speech we learned about, but you're also thinking that whatever you say the first time is makes a possible next appointment.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a game.
Good. You want to have that door open when you leave. You don't want it to swing behind you. Hit you on the backside.
Let's see, keep it short. Okay, let me go so that we get enough of these in. Here are some things that we thought of for those considerations. Definitely succinct statement, and you want to foreshadow that solution. You have already, in the chat, talked about data. And of course, the story. We have to always remember that policymakers, they're not in classrooms. We shouldn't expect them to be. We gripe about that, but why would they be? That's not their job during the day. So we invite them in, and then in the meantime, we sell them these beautiful stories, your personal connections. My thought for you is this, and I have this in the video that we're gonna link you to later. You need to tell those stories, not just the moment when you're with them. Messaging isn't just about the moment you get an appointment. Messaging is about that weekly communication. So whether it's through Twitter or email, send those pictures, send those great stories about what you're doing in your classroom or what's happening in your state or your district. Give them an update. Let them see the great things that are happening. They come away from that thinking you're a positive person, and you're not a whiner, you're not a complainer, you really know great things that are happening, you want to share that. But also they may see the heartbreak, they may see the harder things, and I just think that's really important to build that connection. Honestly, 10 minutes on Twitter, connect them, tag them on your tweets, and let them know the great things that are going on. Should we go to the next one?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do it. Question 5. What is the role of allies? What do you think? How will you use allies to education or allies to your situation when speaking with a policymaker?
Why do allies matter?
Michael, excellent. Michael, do you want to speak to that about access with allies?
What happened was I was able to go to Capitol Hill last summer and talk to the staffers of John Klein, Keith Ellison, Cory Booker, and Al Franken, and that was all in relation to the ESSA, and that was all through the allies that I had through America Achieves and Teach Plus. I never would have been able to get those meetings. I wouldn't even have known how. So just by tapping into those resources and those networks, it actually came right to me. So I could never have gotten those meetings on my own.
Thank you so much.
Great.
That is so true. And we're busy, right? Like, we don't have tons of time to figure out how to do it. And so using your allies to help you get in there is definitely worth your time. Okay, thank you. A broad base of supporters. Definitely, you don't want to only be connected to one. Oh, Heather, that's excellent. Heather is Heather, it's almost as if you're talking about using mindfulness or mindset as an ally.
Huh.
A teaching strategy as an ally. I love that. Okay. Okay, good question there about letting them know who you are and who you represent. Should we go? Let's go to the talking points. I'm looking at the time.
Allie, will you answer that one question about whether should we say whether we're in a union or not, or should we avoid that?
Yeah, okay. So every state's a little different, but you really need to know before, when you go to sit down with a policymaker, first of all, you want, as we've said, you want to look at what is their voting record, what do they say, if you're watching their tweets or if you're watching any of the emails that they send out, you might know about their background and their relationship with a local association. My thought for you is this: in Utah, for me, it is best when I speak to policymakers that I'm very clear with them who I represent. And although I am a proud association member, I do not represent the association when I am speaking to them. I don't work for the association. I feel it is it's just more careful for me to let them know, I am a proud member, but I do not represent the association right now. I represent NNSTOY and Utah's local chapter, NNSTOY. And that has helped me. In fact, I've actually had some policymakers say to me, oh, well, good. They have their own relationship with the association, and the association does powerful work, but that needs to be separate while I am making the case for something different. And so I just have done that. It's the same with political affiliation. While I am associated perhaps with one political party, and many of us as STOYs are politically active, that may not be what you want to walk in with. That may not really matter. What matters is the message that you've brought about the students, about teaching, about salary, whatever it is. And it's so much more important that you represent your state and the teachers in there and teaching in general, the occupation, and not an association, a professional membership of any other kind.
One other point, that first thing up there about unity is powerful. We hang together so we don't hang separately. I know that particularly learned this working in the Senate, when a group of people come in representing several organizations and make their pitch and they all agree on it. That is a very powerful message, as opposed to one person coming in and saying, this is my opinion. Or what often happens is you'll have one person coming in and saying, this is my opinion, and that'll be followed by another person who'll have a slightly different opinion, and that'll be followed by another person with yet another opinion. And it leaves the staff or the policymaker in the position of having to figure out, sort of having to put all these pieces together themselves.
Sure. Yeah, I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, if there are others, it's worth reaching out to see, this is what I think, but I wonder what so-and-so thinks. I wonder what so-and-so thinks. And coalitions that span K-12 and higher ed can be powerful. Coalitions that span into the business community, allies that, span into sectors that we might not typically hang around with, but that do have a stake in this, can be successful too. And sometimes, going to that last point, can be heard in a way that we might not be heard. If it's coming from somebody on the board of trustees for a university, that may have a different sort of, maybe heard differently. And that's just, I don't know if that's a very good example, but that may be heard differently than coming from you or someone else.
So important we know the background and who has already pitched their opinion on it. So this is just what Jane's gone over. Unity's powerful, and when you want to use it that way, use it. But know also that some voices have already perhaps irritated the person you're talking to. So you want to make sure that you're very clear about who you represent and which group will give you that power or that ear. I will tell you, for example, last summer with ours, they had already heard from the association quite a bit. So it was important for me to make sure that I differentiated myself and my message from a different perspective, not from a teacher's rights perspective, but from a what's best for teaching and learning perspective. Those are different, even though they might have the same outcome. But very different. Sometimes that your voice needs to be a little different. All right, question 6. Jane, take it.
How do you position yourself as a go-to resource for policymakers?
This is a STOY thing completely. So we want to really eat this up. How do you position yourself so they come to you?
Allison, you gave a great example of 3 board members calling you up. I think, your goal in all of this, at the end of the day, whether you agree with them or not, you want to be their eyes and ears. You want to be a reliable informant. And that goes a long way.
Absolutely. What happened with that was that our NNSTOY chapter got together, and a couple of us that had the time drafted the letter. We drafted a very professional letter with our opinion about the licensing ruling that was going through. And we signed everyone's name on it, all of our NNSTOY chapter, but I'm the one who sent the email in. And so I'm the one who got the emails and phone calls back, and I had maybe 4 of them email me back and thank me, and this was, I really appreciate this. And then they asked me for my phone number, and I gave it, and 3 of them called me personally. And I represented NNSTOY on those phone calls, but I found it interesting that even though all of our names were on there, I got the calls. And it was super fun to talk to them. Okay, we've got inviting them in, definitely. It makes you the go-to.
Good.
Offering help. I love this, John. Actually knowing something, that's huge. And it's probably one of the most important things is for us to be educated on the issue.
I think in addition to that, also being willing to find out if you don't know.
Oh, huge. In fact, I'm going to go to this so we can get through this. So when you're there, to make sure, again, it's not about one visit. One visit's fun. One visit's exciting. 3 visits is so much better. The person that they want to call. So you want to keep that conversation going. What else can you provide them? What else can you get for them? How else can I illustrate this for you? Will you please come in? I'd like you to see. When the Common Core standards were adopted in Utah, super fun. And people were very passionate about that. And often I would say, I want you to come in and watch me teach, and I'll show you the standard I'm teaching. And they often would not take me up on it because I offered it. And of course, it all worked out in the end, and we're good now. But that was something I said, what else can I show you to convince you? So Twitter is huge, and I'm going to push that one.
Boy, I'm with you. Twitter is huge.
Not every policymaker has Twitter, but here's the thing. For those that do, you have 10 minutes on a Sunday where you can send a tweet out with great things that are happening in the state. Just get them in your local newspaper, your board briefs, or even yourself, pictures of what you're doing in class, and tag those policymakers or board members on that tweet. They see great things happening regularly, and of course they come to you because they know that you're in the know. And I get frequently emails from people in my state representation, but also in my state office, because they know that I'm looking at things. It takes a while to get used to Twitter, but once you get there, it's fun. If not, just use email. If those legislators or policymakers don't do Twitter, then do email.
I think every member of Congress has a Twitter account.
Do they now?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, most offices do, and they really follow that.
For us locally, these people actually do their own Twitter. I would assume most congressmen have someone else running it for them. But locally,
it depends.
I get messages, personal messages, very kind ones, asking me, I'd like to know your opinion. Can I call you? And let's just talk about it. So, yeah, sometimes it's just like the local district school board because of that. Okay, so let's get to our next. Or anything else there on these? Jane, you need to say.
No, I'm good.
Inviting them. This is how
now we have the most important question.
Okay, go ahead, Jane.
Number 7, this is our last question. What do you think is the most important skill that makes you an effective professional in the policy arena? What is the number one skill that you want to develop, to have, to nurture, to be effective with policymakers?
I'm going to address a question on here from Cindy. Is there a problem with privacy of students in the Twitter sphere? Definitely your own district will have a policy on that. Just for example, in my district, as long as I have parent permission about taking pictures, I can do it. I just can't ever have their names anywhere near the kid's face. But you have to get parent permission for that.
Good question.
Oh, excellent. Michael's got confidence on there. I so agree with that. Beautiful. Patience. So true. Personable. Thank you, Leah. That's great. Being personable. There's nothing worse than... I think as teachers, we want to go in there and teach, and we should. John Quam would say, go in there and do what you do best, teach. But we want to make sure that we do it in a way that it's received well. And being personable is what that's about. Listening, speaking, just like I illustrated with the board member that was kind of difficult. I was so excited. I was the first one not to hang up.
So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we're about out of time here. Is there anything you want to say in reflecting on question 7 or do you just want to make us, think about it and wonder if we got it right? Or if there's one answer to that. Any last comments?
I'd just like to say one thing. There is no one answer. I think everybody's comments are really appropriate. But I think one thing that's important to remember is that these people want to look good. They're like everybody else. They want to look good. They want to look knowledgeable. They want to look like they're in touch with their constituents, in touch with their voters. So one way to think about this is your job is to help them look good. Everybody wants to be successful. So what can you do to give them information, support, etc., so that they feel like they're doing a really good job?
Excellent point. And while they're doing it, helping all those cute little kids.
That's right, in the teaching profession.
It's manipulative.
Yeah. And what's this one, Jane?
And remember, if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. As Laurie says, even if you're at the table, you don't want to be the lemon wedge or the parsley. You want to be the main dish.
Right. Okay. Hey, thanks, everybody. I want to just give you a couple of bits of information that might help you. You can save your chat if you want to by going to the very bottom of the chat, and near where it's got to and the name of the person, over on the right is a more with the drop-down caret. And if you click on that, you can drag down to save chat, and it will save your whole chat for you on your computer. You'll find it in your downloads section. And I'm going to send everybody tomorrow the PowerPoint, and also the copy of the link to the video if you'd like to see that. And we are going to, I would encourage you to take a look at the videos about, and that's what that link is there. It's kind of hard to see, but when you get the PowerPoint, you'll be able to see it. And it's at the beginning of the chat. But check out the videos that folks have made about strategies they've used to engage with policymakers. It was in the newsletter today, the lead story. I know several of the people on here today have really good videos, and so you should check them out. And just thank you for another great meeting. I've just really learned a lot and really enjoyed it. And when you get your feedback form, please just take a few minutes. Allison had me cutting questions, don't make it too long. So we really pared it down so that it wouldn't take a lot of time, and we would just get the stuff that we really needed. So be a critical friend, and we really appreciate it.
One final just commercial. We do have our national conference in Washington, D.C. this year. And for the first time, we're going to have a Day on the Hill, July 19th. So all of these skills we've been talking about apply at the federal level too. So make sure to participate in that. It's going to be a lot of fun.